पीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः। So we were discussing the topic the conversation which was taken which took place on 14 December 1882. We are discussing the first part of the Kathamrit, and Sri Ramakrishna was explaining how a salt doll went to measure the depth of the sea, and no sooner did it enter the water than it dissolved. So how could one tell how deep the sea was? How can the salt doll tell how deep the sea was? So that is the way Sri Ramakrishna is explaining when one reaches the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi or Samadhi, where the I is lost, the ego is lost. This salt doll dissolving into the sea means the identity or the ego, or in Patanjali's yoga it is known as asmita. So once the ego goes, then there is nothing left. It is only when ego is there we make the difference between the subject and the object, what we see around us. So Nirvikalpa Samadhi or Samadhi, as explained in the philosophy of Advaita, is an ideal which one has to keep in mind. But as I said, all ideals do not lead or maybe are very difficult to practice in day-to-day life, because if the subject object vanishes, then the mind itself vanishes. So who is the person who is asking the question or who is the person who is asking the answer? That is why Sri Ramakrishna used to give that example that a Advaitin teacher told the disciple that when you start learning instructions from the Guru, I mean in the Advaitic sadhana, I'm not talking of the sadhana which normally we do according to other traditions, but a purely Advaitic sadhana, which is very rare, as I keep explaining many times, that Advaita is a philosophy and Advaita as a practice. There are two different things. It is very nice to know philosophy or even discuss as we are doing now. Sri Ramakrishna gives a hint, but he did not allow many of his disciples to practice Advaita except Naren. Even Swami Abhedananda, when Naren or Swami Vivekananda touched him, that was during their student days. They had not yet taken sannyasa. So Abhedanandaji was sitting and meditating. Swami Vivekananda touched him just to, when both were meditating. And suddenly he went into a trance. He felt as if an electric current was entering him. But Sri Ramakrishna, sitting in some other room, realized or heard that. And not only heard, he understood that this is happening, and he scolded Narendra. He said, "Why did you do it?" He was developing spiritually in a particular bhava, that Advaita bhava which he expected Naren to follow. He didn't tell anybody else, not even Swami Abhedananda. So each one has his or her own tradition. So one should be very faithful to the advice which is given by the Guru, specific advice, that is the idea. And Advaita as a practice, he thought only Naren was fit, at least among his direct disciples. If you see all his direct disciples, most of them were asked to meditate in a particular way on the Ishta, on a personal God, either on himself or on Shakti or on somebody else. Whatever way of sadhana, dualistic way of sadhana, he prescribed uh, for the different devotees. devotees means the disciples, both householder as well as monks. But this Advaita as a philosophy, what happens when the mind vanishes at the seventh plane? He was explaining the different planes, and then he says when it goes, reaches the seventh plane and one attains samadhi, what one feels cannot be described in words. So the Advaitic experience, it is an experience which one has, and after having that experience, one cannot possibly describe it in words because the mind itself vanishes. To explain that, he is giving this example of the salt doll. So the salt doll, no matter for some time, the salt doll, when it is submerged in the sea, it does not melt immediately. It passes through different stages. But slowly the salt starts melting. That is what Sri Ramakrishna means here, that when the uh, spiritual current or the kundalini rises through these different planes, or the mind ascends through these different planes, and it vanishes when it reaches the seventh plane. Before that, even in the stage of dhyana, the feeling that I am meditating, there is a deep sense of uh, concentration, no doubt, but the ego is still there. The meditator and the thing meditated upon. It may be a form or it may be a formless God, as the Advaitins, they meditate on a Mahavakya. So they meditate on a Mahavakya, which is Aham Brahmasmi or maybe Tattvamasi. So they meditate on an eternal truth, eternal relationship between the individual soul and the Paramatma or the Supreme Soul. And at the stage of dhyana, the sixth plane, if you can call it the sixth plane, even at that plane, there is a distinction between the supreme goal, the meditator, and the thing that is meditated upon. It may be a Mahavakya, it may be a mantra, it may be a form, it may be anything. So when you meditate and when you reach the plane below the seventh plane, till then, Sri Ramakrishna says, a little bit of the salt doll is still there. So you can't say the salt doll has vanished. But when it becomes one with the water, when the salt doll totally vanishes, that happens only when the mind transcends the seventh plane, vanishes. It does not transcend, it simply vanishes. So the least, what do you mean by the mind vanishing? Mind, as I always keep repeating, has four parts: mana, buddhi, chitta, and ahankara. These are classified as four different categories of the same mind, or you can say it is the same state, uh, uh, the, the different states of the same mind. So the different states, the chitta, of course, it has a particular function, ahankara has another function, manas is another function, it is the reactive mind, and the chitta is the stored samskaras, which also have to vanish. When you say mind vanishes at the seventh plane, when Sri Ramakrishna says the mind vanishes, what he means is that the mana, buddhi, even the buddhi, which is most subtle among all the different aspects of the mind, the manas is the grossest. Then we have the samskaras or chitta. Chitta is the mind stuff. So the mind stuff means all the accumulated impressions of our thoughts, of our past thoughts. So you can as well imagine what it means to reach the seventh plane, because unless you get rid of the old samskaras totally, that is why they say to reach to that ultimate Advaitic experience of oneness with Brahman, it is so difficult because you need to hold on to something. Sri Ramakrishna also held on to the image of Kali when Totapuri asked him, now you meditate. Then he said, I try my best. Even a person, even an avatara like Sri Ramakrishna says, I can't give up the form because my mother, whom I was worshipping for so many years, doing sadhana, intense sadhana, not like us, How can I just ignore, or how can I say that uh, form has to, I have to do away with that form? So then Totapuri forced him literally, took a glass piece and uh, uh, touched his eyebrows. I mean, the place between the two eyebrows. He just pierced it. He just pierced it. And then, as soon as he pierced, he said, now focus on this. And then he said, no, what can I do? Even the mother does not vanish. I can't simply wish away. The form still remains. That means the feeling that I and my mother, even in a deep state of concentration, just before Nirvikalpa Samadhi, he could still feel the form of mother. So then Totapuri tells him that now with the sword of knowledge, you cut the form that you see. It's a very difficult thing to understand. How can you destroy the form that you are meditating upon with so much of devotion and so much of concentration? But he had to do it. So that shows how difficult it is, that this I or the ego, that is one part of the that is known as ahankara, that still remains. And that is the reason why the mind does not vanish. So here Sri Ramakrishna, when he says the mind vanishes, he means all the four aspects of the mind have to vanish. It's not enough if the chitta vanishes, all the samskaras are uh, uh, taken apart, or all the samskaras are dealt with. You have to deal with the samskaras. Of course, you have to quieten the mind, which itself is such a difficult task. It is not even easy. It's not easy to even deal with the manas, which is constantly bubbling. Then what to speak of the samskaras? So this is a stage which one can only feel and cannot describe in words, because Sri Ramakrishna, after he reached that state, he could come down, because he was a Vijnani, as he says. Vijnana is another state. Whether it is higher than the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, we do not know. There is a lot of controversy. People say that this Advaitic state is the highest state. But if we listen to some of the experiences of Swami Brahmananda, who says Nirvikalpa Samadhi is the beginning of Advaitic sadhana. Nirvikalpa Samadhi is the beginning of sadhana. Now you can imagine, there may be states after one attains to this Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when the mind itself vanishes at the seventh plane. There may be some people who can even come down, as Sri Ramakrishna so nicely explained. This is one explanation. He says ki when a person climbs the staircase, he goes up and up and up, and then he reaches the terrace. And he says that he sees the terrace is made of the same material as the different steps that lead to the terrace. And then he says, when one comes down from the terrace, then he feels, oh, this is what the same material which I saw on the terrace is here. So what he wants to say is, beyond Nirvikalpa Samadhi, though it cannot be described in words, the person who comes down voluntarily, which is very rare, again I tell you, he says for a normal person, normal jiva, once he reaches Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the body just falls off. At the most, they say, is 21 days according to the Yoga Shastras. The body cannot last. But for some reason, the avatars, they hold on, they voluntarily retain that ego of knowledge. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Shankaracharya retained the ego of knowledge to teach people. Otherwise, what one feels in that Nirvikalpa Samadhi, according to him, according to Sri Ramakrishna, cannot be described in words. So then how does one come down and to the ordinary plane? So it is possible only for an incarnation. Sri Ramakrishna gave another beautiful example. You see, unless one reads the gospel, it is very, very, very difficult to understand the essence of the scriptures. Sri Ramakrishna has an answer for almost everything, every question that is asked. Now we see very often, we see on YouTube, everybody, according to Sri Ramakrishna, says that my watch is correct. The method that I prescribe is correct. And this is the method that has to be followed. So everybody thinks that his God or the God he worships or the path that he follows is the only path. The other paths are either wrong or they will never help you to reach the goal. But Sri Ramakrishna says there are infinite paths to that infinite reality. Reality may be infinite, so the paths have to be infinite. So that idea that one can reach the terrace through different stairs, one can go through some other staircase, but every time it goes, the person finds after reaching the top that the same material is used. But what about coming down? Who are the people who can come down? Who can voluntarily accept the ego to teach the world? They are known as the incarnations. So to explain to explain that, though it cannot be explained in words in that state, when Sri Ramakrishna says, when the mind vanishes at the seventh plane, Sapta Bhumi, that is what he says. When the mind reaches the seventh plane, if the mind exists, then it will not reach the seventh plane. So you have to give up the staircase to reach the terrace. So one attains samadhi, and then what one feels at that time, one cannot explain in words. It cannot be described in, it has to be experienced. But what about the person who has experienced and then he comes down to explain the lower experiences? So he says, the if for some reason or even before reaching the highest, what about the others who do not reach the seventh plane, which is also a very difficult task to reach the state of dhyana, the sixth state in Patanjali's 7 stages. Even to reach that is a very big task. So till then, what will happen to the ego? Because when we meditate, our ego doesn't seem to vanish. In fact, not only does it not vanish, but it gives us so much trouble. All the troubles that we encounter, that we feel, is because of this ego. So the ego continues to persist, and if that till we reach the highest state, of course, when Sri Ramakrishna says the I-ness does not vanish, then the rascal I and the servant I, kacha ami and paka ami, that is what is meant. So if the ego has to remain, then let it remain as a servant ego till the mind vanishes. Even in the state of dhyana, as I told you, the object and the subject, they merge, but still after the dhyana is over, after the deep meditative state is over, the person feels when he deals with people around him that that I is still there. Otherwise, he will not. If the I vanishes, then the person will not live. After samadhi, they say after 21 days, the person will not live. The sadhaka will not live. So Sri Ramakrishna is saying, what happens to this I? The I that makes one worldly and attaches to lust and greed, Kamini Kanchan, is the rascal I. Now this is Sri Ramakrishna's way of explaining, because he for him the world is nothing but lust and greed. Though the translation is woman and gold, but in this gospel it is always translated as lust and greed, because he was addressing men. So for men it is Kamini Kanchan. Kanchan is gold, but that doesn't mean just gold. It has to be taken figuratively. What it means actually, what Sri Ramakrishna meant, is that attachment in the whole world, if you see, it is nothing but Kamini Kanchan. So the mind that makes one worldly and one is attached to lust and greed is, he calls it the rascal I. So rascal I means kachami. Because of it, the individual soul and Atman appear apart. So no matter what we read, how many times we read, the fact that the Shiva, Jiva and the Shiva, or the individual Atma and the Paramatma, it's very good to listen about this identity of the individual soul and the universal soul or Brahman. It may be very easy to intellectually conceptualize all these Advaitic truths. But because of this rascal I, that is why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, only Naren is fit for the practice of Advaita. Why not others? Because for in them, this rascal I, as he says, he uses the word rascal I or kacha ami. Kacha ami means it's a very crude type of I. It is so strong because of attachment to lust and greed that for them the path of dualism is more suitable. They just can't say the individual soul and Atman are same because they cannot feel, because of this kachami, they will and they will always continue to feel that the individual soul and Atman appear apart. They are separate. No matter, see, there are people who try to, but for that you have to get rid of this. You have to perhaps renounce the world, stay in a place where when the objects of lust and greed come, even in the mind, you have to drive them away. So the path of neti neti, which is the most difficult, may be very easy to understand, but is it so easy to wish away the world? It is not only physically, forget physically, even if you somehow manage to go away in solitude, even there the rascal I, Sri Ramakrishna says, comes and creates a barrier between the individual soul and the Atman. So he says if a stick is put on water, he gives another example to make it very clear. The water appears to be divided into two. It appears, though it is all one. Now this is how it is explained. Sri Ramakrishna says, no doubt the Advaitic truth is true, but as long as the stick is there, the water appears to be divided into two. The reality is that the water is one, but it appears to be two because of the stick. This I-ness is the stick. Now remove the stick and water will become one as before. So one does not have to, we have to undo the effects of I. The kacha ami has to be replaced by paka ami. So that is why a more natural path is to keep the servant I, the child I. And I say, okay, my ego is there. My ego is always disturbing me. It doesn't really matter. The ego is going to remain. So if it remains, let it remain as a paka ami, the servant I. So that is why for all sadhakas or for all normal aspirants, unlike Naren, all other direct disciples, a ideal was given. A ideal, a ishta was given. And a relationship, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, for bhaktas or for people who are following the path of duality, he used to say, all you have to do is try to find out who I am, who you are, and what is the relationship between us. So what do you mean by relationship? By relationship, either the servant I or the child I, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, I don't know the other things about Vedanta. I just know that me and my mother. So his I, he was showing to the entire world how one should practice sadhana, that the I that makes you a servant of the Lord, or the servant of your Ishta, or a child of your Ishta, or a devotee of your Ishta, any bhava one has to hold on to. That I is known as pakami. It is a stick. but it is dividing the water, no doubt. But it is not harmful as much as lust and greed are. That makes the division almost permanent. Then one cannot aspire to be one with that supreme soul, because the Ishta, at least at a lower stage or a different stage when one is practicing sadhana, the attachment to the Lord, the Paka Ami, has the effect of countering the influence of Kacha Ami. The ripe ego controls or destroys the evil effects of the raw ego. So, what is that rascal I? Now he is again saying, Kachami is trying to explain, Sri Ramakrishna is trying to explain the nature of this rascal I. That which says, don't you know me? I have so much money. Who's greater than I? Then he says, if a thief steals 10 rupees, the victim first snatches the money back and then gives the thief a good beating. He doesn't leave him even then. He hands him over to the police and gets him punished. The rascal I says, don't you know who you robbed of 10 rupees? Such impertinence. He is giving a very crude example. So if somebody takes something away from our ego is so strong, if somebody criticizes us or takes away certain things from, makes a mistake, say, we not only beat him, I mean, that is the nature of the world. If once somebody steals something, a normal person would, okay, when she gets it back, he will forget. He will forgive and forget. But the ego is so deep rooted that he will not leave. Sri Ramakrishna gives this very drastic example. He says, it is not enough. Why did he steal from me? No, I want to punish him further. He will give him to the police and then instruct the police. How dare he take my money? That ego. That is how we behave in the world. Somebody has troubled us, okay, we can pardon him, but we don't. We don't have that kind of titiksha or that kind of forgiveness. We may forgive him verbally, but we never forget. We remember, oh, this person had done this particular thing to me. I'll never forget in my life. And people think it's a big thing not to forget whatever has been done to you. So he says, even 10 rupees if somebody steals from you, he not only, after catching the thief, he not only punishes the thief, gives him to the police and asks him to give a punishment to him just because he sold 10 rupees. So it is not the money which one has lost that is important. It is that ego which makes us feel revengeful, feel not remorseful, revengeful towards the person whom we think who has deprived us of certain things. So, Sri Ramakrishna used to make fun. Two brothers are quarreling. This is my land, this is my land, not knowing it is the whole land belongs to the Lord. So, that's the idea. That is what ego does. So, Vijay asks a question now. He is explaining the evil effects of Kacha Ami, that which is inspired by Kamini Kanchan or the lust and greed, because these are the only two things which hold a person down in the world. Without this, one will automatically go into samadhi. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna keeps on emphasizing, though it is difficult, at least in the mind we can have a feeling that a day should come when we will be freed from the attachment to the world. So to do that, we get a mantra from the Guru, we meditate so that the Paka Ami becomes so strong that it can deal with our Kacha Ami, or it will deal with the rascal ego or the raw ego. And the ripe ego, though it will not give us directly Nirvikalpa Samadhi, at least it will take us very near. So constantly beating the lower ego with the higher ego, the ego of knowledge, the ego of one's relationship with the Lord, the servant, I, that I am the servant. Hanuman, of course, had a ego, but that ego was a ripe ego. I am a servant of Rama. and I can do anything because of Rama's, because I am connected to Rama, I am powerful. It's not that I am powerful. If you steal, I beat you. No. If you steal something, Sri Ramakrishna says, for 10 rupees, we punish that person eternally. We are not satisfied. It's not because you lost 10 rupees, but because it was stolen, it is mine. How can you dare? How dare you even touch it? So that ego never goes. So now Vijay is asking Sri Ramakrishna, if you cannot experience samadhi and be freed from the attachment to the world without getting rid of I consciousness, Vijay is asking, it seems better to follow the path of Brahma Jnana to attain samadhi. If I-ness persists in the path of devotion, it would seem better to take the path of knowledge. Now, this is another typical uh, argument given by people who are lazy, who say we don't like the path of devotion, we are Advaitins. So Vijay Krishna Goswami, being a Brahmo, they did not believe in a God with form. So they had that. So they had that feeling that Vijay Krishna Goswami, who himself was he belonged to the famous Goswami family, a descendant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Sri Ramakrishna was kind to him, though he was a Brahmo. He knew that in the heart of his heart he had a devotional temperament. So he still, because of his preaching, as a Brahmo, he was not supposed to teach the path of bhakti. They were meditating on the formless God. God alone knows what they meditated upon. That is why Sri Ramakrishna made fun of them. Sri Ramakrishna, you see, though he made fun, they did not feel bad. But like a child used to tell the facts. So when they took him to a Brahmo prayer and they started this prayer, of course it was in Bengali, perhaps all the Brahmo songs are in Bengali. So they started as normally people who are influenced by a lot of Advaitic teaching do. They said, okay, we are all Brahman and the world does not exist and we belong to so many things. They were praying loudly. Then Sri Ramakrishna jokingly said, please stop, please stop. Otherwise, what will happen to those women there? You are married people. If you just let the world go away, then who will look after them? Oder ki hobe? What will happen to them? So he says, why do you be a hypocrite? Come down, say that I have this ego that I have a family, I have this, I have property. As he explained just now, 10 rupees somebody takes from you. He says, your ego is so strong. It's not the loss of 10 rupees that you are worried about. You not only catch the thief, then you go and hand him over to the police and instruct them to punish him more than what the crime that he has done. Because he says, such impertinence, he says. You robbed me of 10 rupees. I'll not let you go. He's not satisfied if he gets his 10 rupees back. So, Sri Ramakrishna says, if this I-ness persists, Vijay Krishna Goswami is asking Sri Ramakrishna, oh, then the problem will never be solved. That ego is still there. So I go on repeating the name, the mantra, do sadhana, and that ego will still persist. So what's the use that even that servant ego or the child ego that I am the child of mother, I am the child of, or the servant of Lord, as Hanuman said, I am the servant of Rama. So that ego, why not get rid of that ego? So he wants to jump because Brahmo Samaj path was a direct path. They thought it is all, though they didn't realize. That's why Sri Ramakrishna again and again emphasizes, if you are attached to lust and gold, then you are a rascal, that is the raw ego, kacha ami, will not vanish. So what to speak of the higher ego? At least if you have a higher ego, you admit the fact that I have these problems, I have these weaknesses. Oh Lord, please help me. I am your servant or I am your child. I don't know what is the path. That is a safer path. But Vijay Krishna Goswami, his Brahmo background does not allow him, because they don't believe in a personal God. They don't believe in an Ishta. Neither they believe in any mantra. They just want to rise to the highest plane. which Thakur said is not possible because uh, you have a family, you have so many attachments. How can you just wish away those attachments? So his logic was that is it not better to take to the path of knowledge? Now let us see what Sri Ramakrishna answers. So Sri Ramakrishna then tells Vijay Krishna Goswami, okay, one or two can get rid of the I consciousness by experiencing samadhi through the path of knowledge. But usually, he is speaking of a vast majority of people. One or two, can you imagine? So, out of millions of people, one or two people can get rid of this I consciousness by experiencing samadhi. I have told you that as an ideal, not as an practice. But usually, I-ness does not go. You may reason 1,000 ways. That is what the futile practitioners of the monastic sadhana. Not that Sri Ramakrishna discouraged. Of course, he encouraged Naren to do it, but there was only one Naren, whereas all the others, he, even including the great Swami Abhedananda, who talked so much of knowledge in the West.
Maharaj, your mic is muted for some reason.
Your mic is muted, Maharaj.
Now, is it okay?
Yes, Maharaj.
It got muted only now or for a long time?
Just now, Maharaj.
Oh,
Just now,
just
yeah.
now. Achha, I don't know. Maybe by mistake somebody has unmuted me. I I didn't unmute. Anyway, now you can hear me, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. But you told me that you will have that view. What is that view known as? Speaker's view. But I am seeing the grid view. I
No,
mean,
it's in speakers view, Maharaj, but people have started their cameras, so if someone
oh,
is unmute, they come into the main picture because
okay,
so
fine, fine. So
everyone
now you can
everyone
hear
can.
me now. Only for a few seconds you missed my voice. Okay.
Yes, yes,
So
Maharaj.
I'll continue.
Yes,
So Sri Ramakrishna is telling Vijay Krishna Goswami, though it would be an ideal state to reach samadhi, this I is not such a simple thing that it will go away. Since it remains, then let it remain as a pakami, a I which helps you to gradually get rid of it, maybe at a later stage, but at least it will counter the bad influence of the raw ego. So with the ripe ego, this is a very nice way of Sri Ramakrishna. You will not get these examples in the scriptures. So to understand the scriptures and why certain people cannot follow certain sadhanas, you need to refer to the gospel now and then. Not only now and then, daily. In fact, when one of the monks brahmacharis went to Swami Brahmananda and thinking that he will give him some wonderful instructions. People want the highest samadhi even before doing anything. So the advice appeared to be very simple. Then Brahmananji famously said, it is recorded. He said, do you want Nirvikalpa Samadhi? He thought perhaps the person who might have asked thought perhaps some Upanishad or great Advaitic teaching. And now I have become a monk. What am I uh, supposed to do? I can directly go the path of knowledge. So then he seems to have said to that brahmachari or monk, I don't know whom he addressed, but he said, if you want Brahmagyana, then read the gospel. Perhaps it is a very simple advice. People just want to skip the gospel and try to read this Advaitic text and that Advaitic text, thinking that they have that they are adhikaris. The first adhikari is to wish away the world. So you can't have the world and then talk about Advaita. So Sri Ramakrishna is more reasonable. He says this I still finds the raw I, still finds its way back to you. So he says, 1,000 ways you may try. You may listen to Advaita whole day, you may listen to all those YouTube videos. But that I will come the moment somebody speaks a single word. Even his own guru, Totapuri, he was sitting and having a smoke. He was not smoke, he had lighted a dhuni and he was meditating. A person comes with, he thought, oh, I got fire here, I'll just light up my pipe. So from somewhere, a person comes and tries to take a little of that fire and light his hookah or whatever he had, a pipe. So as he was lighting the tobacco using his sacred fire, Tutapuri got terribly angry and he became started to chase him and beat him. Then Sri Ramakrishna was there and he said, "Are what happened to your Advaita knowledge? Your ego is still not gone. You think this is your fire and you got so angry. How come you talk such big things and what is the use of your Advaita knowledge?" So similarly, Sri Ramakrishna says, if you cut a Ashwatha tree is supposed to, even if you cut the whole trunk, from the root again a new Ashwatha tree will start sprouting again. It is very difficult unless you remove all the roots and dig and completely destroy the roots, then the chances of Ashwatha tree. So this ego is like that. No matter you cut from some other place, it will rise again in some other way, subtle way. You may not have a gross ego like many people, worldly people, but even then, that little ego, one cannot become egoless. That is what he says. So if it does not go, then what to do? Let that rascal ego remain as the servant I. O Lord, you are my master, I am your servant. Live with this attitude. I am the servant, I am the devotee. There is no harm in this kind of I-ness. So he gives another example, which is a typical Bengali home remedy. In Bengal, they say sweetmeats made of sugar, refined sugar, causes acidity in the stomach. But he says when you have trouble, but still you want to uh, take sugar, then take sugar candy. Sugar candy is something which uh, khadi sakar they call. It's the hardened sugar. That is supposed to be better than refined sugar or some other form of sugar. Sugar candy is not counted among the sweetmeats. That means it is ego, no doubt. It is a sweet. Like other sweets, it is also a sweet, but one causes acidity or pain in the stomach, whereas candy helps to relieve the pain. So he's giving a very common example, saying that the ego that I am a servant or I am a disciple of so and so, I have faith in my Ishta, my Guru, or the devotional path that I am following. That is also a ego, definitely, but it is much better than the other ego, which makes us attached to lust and greed. So that is why he's saying, moreover, he says, the path of knowledge is very difficult. Now, he's listing, people think that the gospel is for devotees or householders. It's not so, it is for everybody. In fact, Brahmananji, as I told you, said, if you want Brahmagyana, you read the gospel. Read means try to read it, meditate on it, and understand it. It's a direct, because he has covered everything, all the paths, infinite paths to that infinite reality. Sri Ramakrishna's life itself. That is why the Upanishads and the Gita, Swami Vivekananda, a person like Swami Vivekananda said, he didn't ask us to read any bhashya or this bhashya or one particular school. There are so many schools. Ramanuja has written a bhashya on the Prasthanatraya, that is the Gitas, the Upanishad, and the Brahma Sutras. These are the three scriptures. Every Acharya comes and writes a commentary on his viewpoint, on his pathway. Then what about a common man? He gets confused. If he reads Shankara for some time, Ramanuja for some time, and then he says this commentary, it says exactly the opposite of what the other commentary says. They are commenting on the same verse, but there is so much of difference. So gospel helps us to reconcile, and that too by giving examples which one encounters in our day-to-day life. So he knows that Vijay Krishna Goswami, being a very, very staunch and faithful Brahmo, And he's a Brahmo preacher. Not only is a Brahmo, but he's a Brahmo preacher. So he has to preach. So if he doesn't believe in what he preaches, then it will be difficult for him. So it's trying to somehow convince Sri Krishna that the path of knowledge also is good, or it is. But Sri Krishna now wants to tell him why I'm not saying one or two, he said, can follow the path of knowledge. But the path of knowledge is very difficult. Knowledge cannot be attained without ridding yourself of the conviction that you are the body. So till we leave alone attachment to lust and greed, that is very gross. That perhaps one may get rid of. But can you get rid of the feeling that you are the body? So you see the conditions that the path of knowledge demands on a sadhaka. What are the conditions? First, he says, knowledge cannot be attained, I mean, the path of knowledge. When you say Aham Brahmasmi, it is not the body. You can't equate your body with that of the Lord. You can't do that. So, first, you have to get rid of the conviction that we are the body, which is itself which in itself is so difficult. So, are we adhikaris? Are we capable of doing that? In the Kali Yuga, then he adds, life depends on food. It's a fact. Nobody need to tell us that we don't eat for some few days. We can't do tapasya as they did, fasting for months and living only on water and slowly, gradually giving that up. That was an age when the body was strong enough to do that. And Sri Krishna knows that in this Kali Yuga, life depends on food. With the conviction that I am the body, the I-ness does not disappear. As long as the feeling that. So, what is the solution for such people? If the I-ness does not disappear, are you to give up sadhana? No. So, the path of devotion is enjoined for this Kali Yuga. It is an easy path. If you sing his names and glories and pray to him longingly from the core of your heart, you will attain God. There is no doubt about it. So you'll reach the same goal, maybe a little slowly, or maybe, but that is the only option left for us. Then he says, he gives another example. It's like drawing a line on the surface of water without placing a bamboo stick on it. You find that the water has been divided into two parts, but this line will not last. Which line? What is the meaning of that line in the water? The feeling of the servant eye, or the eye of a devotee, or the eye of a child, that I am a child of the Divine Mother. That's why Sri Ramakrishna again and again said that if I follow the path of Jnana, some Pandit came to him and told him, you see, how to get rid of your ego. One is the knower, then one is the known, and the knowledge which connects. So they call it Bheda Triputi. And there are elaborate explanations. Mind, it will, one has to have a very sharp mind to understand. Then you go into logic of that. How, what is the knower, who is the knower, who is the known, and what is the knowledge which connects them, all these things. Then Sri Krishna, though he excelled in the path of knowledge also, but he just to convince the devotees, he said, I don't know. As a simple child, he told that Pandit, you may go on with this Triputi, Bheda, and all those logic which one needs to practice Jnana, but I am a simple devotee. I know only one thing, me and my mother. Ami or Amar Ma. Only two things I know. I don't understand your all big theories. So here he says the feeling that I am a devotee, that ego, that I am a child of mother, or I am a servant of the Lord or mother, or I am a devotee in the real sense, not as one who people normally think the moment they get a guru or the moment they follow certain sampradaya, they become devotees. Oh, we are devotees. What do you mean by devotee? Devotee is attachment to the Lord, and that feeling that the Lord is mine. Compared to the path of bhakti, though it appears easy, it is not so. You have to love Lord more than you love anybody else. Of course, you can love your children, love your people around Thakur side, it's fine. But as manifestations of that Lord, because you love them through in and through the Lord. So the Lord's love is primary. So M is giving a beautiful verse from the Gita itself, Bhagavad Gita. क्लेशोऽधिकतरस्तेषाम् अव्यक्तासक्तचेतसाम् अव्यक्ता हि गतिर्दुःखम् देहवद्भिर avapyate. So the same thing which Gita says in the 12th chapter, which is known as Bhakti Yoga, he says 12th chapter, this is the 5th verse. Kleshodika tarastesham avyakta sakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukkham dehavadbhiravapyate. That means it is more difficult for those whose minds are attached to the unmanifest. Unmanifest means the Advaitic, the path of knowledge. To imagine, to conceptualize the formless God, which the Brahmos were desperately trying to do. Of course, they believed at least the God had qualities. Saguna, Nirakara. Nirakara means without any shape or form. Some abstract concept. Oh, where is God? Oh, he is compassionate. Where is his compassion? Compassion can be imagined only if you imagine a form of God. A person, you can't expect that the whole space around you is compassionate to you. How can you imagine that? Because space is neutral. If you want to imagine compassion, you have to imagine it in a person. A person, a supreme person or a supreme God who has these qualities. He has to have some form. But anyway, they believe that Nirakara, God is Nirakara, but is full of kindness, full of compassion. And when evil things happen to us, where does that compassion go? Then you can't say, then you have to say, if you are really logical, you have to say, oh, that compassion God has now become a cruel God. So where has this cruelty come from? If you ascribe only compassion to the Lord, then you have to imagine a noble soul who is always compassionate. You imagine, oh, he is our Lord, Christ, for example, or Sri Ramakrishna or Krishna, who always was ready to help, unlike other human beings. He used to forgive, and not only forgive, as so Jesus Christ said, forgive other sins as you would if you expect the Lord to forgive your sins. So what he was saying that unless we meditate upon somebody who has these great, wonderful, noble qualities in fullest measure, we may have, some of the human beings may have some noble qualities like forgiving, forgetting, and all those things. But the Lord is supposed to be, if the Lord also is revengeful, then where will we go? So that is why it is very difficult to understand a unmanifest presence, because it is very hard for the embodied soul to reach the unmanifest. Deha vadbhir avapyate avyakta hi gatir dukkham. To it is dukkham means very difficult, very hard. To a person who is attached, deha vadbhir means one who is attached to the body. Just to say I don't have a body, it is like a tooth is paining, and I try to reason and use all my Advaitic knowledge and say my tooth is not paining. It is not possible unless, of course, it is possible for those who have attained to that highest plane where the ego is not there. Maybe they don't feel the pain. But till we reach that state, the embodied soul has to follow the path of devotion. That is why the 12th chapter, in the 5th verse itself, the Lord is telling Arjuna, there are two paths, the path of knowledge and the path of devotion. But the path of knowledge is difficult for those who are attached to their bodies. Now, body attachment is not just one's body. Then it multiplies because you are attached to other bodies. You are attached to your children's bodies. So the whole attachment goes on increasing. Our body itself is a big headache to get rid of. That attachment to our own body is the cause of so much suffering to us. Then you can imagine if you are attached to other bodies, then their sufferings also you are taking on yourself, because you feel that this body is attached to my body. These bodies, at least a few bodies. So the embodied soul, embodied means one who feels that he is the body more than the soul. And to attain to that state, some kind of relationship has to be uh, induced so that we can have a more sustaining or a more stronger relationship with the God than with other people. So avyakta hi gatir dukkham. That's why he says you follow the path of bhakti. The ego is not going to go because we are all not only sadhakas but ordinary people, but even sadhakas find it difficult. The path of loving devotion to God is the law of this age, Kali Yuga. The path of knowledge is very difficult. The servant ego, servant I, the servant of I of a devotee, I of a child. Now Vijay is asking Sri Krishna. He says, okay, I accept what you are saying. You ask us to renounce the rascal I, that is Kachami. Is there any harm in the servant I? Suppose I replace it. But what is the harm if I retain? Even that is an ego. I was earlier attached to the things of the world, now I am attached to my God. So what is the difference? Then Sri Krishna explains. He wants to know if there is any harm in that. If you get stuck, he is even now, his monastic training or his Brahmo ideals are making him feel that even that person who is devoted to his Krishna or Rama or some god, he is a ignorant person. He is just placing his faith because he is weak. He wants God to help him. That ego he has to get rid of. I am a Gyani. I don't have any such ego. I don't want God in my life. So, is there any harm in that servant ego? Maybe he'll get stuck to his Lord. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, no, no, no. One should have this ego, the servant I. That is to say, I am the servant of the Lord. I am his devotee. There is no harm in that. Rather, it leads to God realization. Then Vijay asks immediately another question. Well, sir, what is the nature of feelings of lust and anger of a man who has the servant I? Now, this is another question. He says people pretend, or even if they are not, they pretend that they are devotees of God, but we see they also have the same problem of anger, lust, and other things. So, what are the difference? What is the nature of the feelings of lust and anger? Even if they are there, do you think they are harmless? Then Sri Krishna says, it is only the semblance of lust and anger in the man if he has the right feeling. If he's on the right path, he may now and then occasionally have these feelings, but they are harmless. They are not as harmful as if they had the ego very strong. If he retains the feeling of the servant I or that of the I of a devotee after having God realization, he can do no harm to others. Now, this is a slightly higher state. He says a sword, there was an idea that there is a stone known as Paras Mani. They say if you touch it is known as philosopher's stone. Maybe it is an imaginary concept, but the idea is that even if you take a steel sword and touch the Paras Mani, it becomes gold. That's the idea. So people used to take, that is what they believed, but whether it is true or not, the figurative meaning of this is if a sword has touched the philosopher's stone, sword will still be there. But a golden sword is harmless. It cannot kill people. It has the semblance of a sword, but it cannot kill anybody. Similarly, he says, if a person who is given up his gross ego but has retained the ego of a servant or a child of a devotee, he also may get angry or he also may get, but these are all temporary things. They will vanish. They may not last long. Then he gives another beautiful example. He says the fronds of a coconut tree dry up and drop off, only leaving a mark on the trunk. The fronds means the leaves and the whole uh, sort of branch which falls down. When it dries, the new green leaves come, then the lower ones just fall off. But still they leave a mark. They don't no doubt fall, but you know that there was a frond, that there was a branch there. So Sri Ramakrishna says one can make out from these marks that there were once palm or the coconut fronds there. Similarly, the ego of one who has realized God only leaves a mark, only a semblance of lust and anger. He then behaves like a child. His nature becomes that like a child. So, a child is not subject to the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. It takes the same amount of time for a child to give up something as it does for him to be attracted to it. So you will find that not that children are not attracted, but adults, when they are attracted to certain things, it is very difficult for them to give up because they think they are more mature, their attachment is stronger, but a child is still fresh. One moment he will be attached. He wants a chocolate, he wants an ice cream. And then he gets a toy, he throws away the ice cream and he runs through that. That means it takes the same amount of time for a child to give up something as it does for him to be attracted to it. Whereas what Sri Ramakrishna is saying is a person with a ego cannot give up so easily. Ego persists. It makes him feel, oh, I have lost this, I have lost this. So the mind is always not hankering. It is so remorseful, as Sri Ramakrishna gave an earlier example. He has lost 10 pounds or 10 rupees. The thief has been caught. You take your 10 rupees and then forget about it. Why are you keen that you should give him to the police and tell the police now you punish him nicely so that he will never rob again? So that means that attraction is not been given up fully. That feeling, it's not the money, but the feeling that it is my money and how can he steal it? So also the child, it is also attracted. But Sri Ramakrishna says the child attraction is as feeble as his giving up. The moment he likes it, he will take it. In 5 minutes, he will throw away the toy, he will take something else. So child is not subject to the three gunas. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, they are just, the child is, basically children are born pure. But then slowly as they grow, the three strands of attachment, that is sattva is a milder attachment, it's attachment through knowledge. Rajas is attachment through ego, very strong ego, and tamas is attachment through dullness. So even that is a kind of attachment. I don't want to do anything, I just want to sit down, do nothing, because I cannot get up and do something. So rajas is slightly better, it may lead to sattva. So anyway, the child is not subject to it, he is fully sattvic. Then he says, gives a final example, and I will conclude. You can take, I think, what is the time? I think we have just 10 minutes more. I have taken more time. I just joined late. You can take a child's piece of cloth worth 5 rupees by tempting him with a half a pice doll. He will not understand the value. If he has a cloth which is worth 5 rupees, but you give him a small doll, he thinks it is the same. Oh, this is more valuable. So he is so unworldly. He may first say that I won't give you this cloth. My father brought it for me, but everything is the same to a child. There is nothing big or small to him. He has no feeling of caste. His mother says he is your elder brother. Even if he is a carpenter of low caste, the child will sit with him and eat from the same plate. A child hates no one. He has no feeling of purity and impurity. He doesn't even bother to clean his hands with mud after relieving himself. So that is, in those days they used to did not have perhaps water, and they used to use mud. So anyway, it is for the mother to clean the child. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna says. Similarly, some people after attaining samadhi live with the eye of devotee or the eye of a servant, the ego of the servant. And he says, even after attaining samadhi, Sri Ramakrishna is giving his own example. Why did he, if one samadhi is the highest state, why will he come down? Just to teach the word. As I told you, avatara means coming down. Avatarana means coming down. Climbing the steps means going up. Only a few, after reaching the highest terrace, can come down. They come down out of compassion, out of grace. So similarly, even after God realization, he retains the I-ness, but his I-ness is like that of a child. So that childlike behavior you see in Sri Ramakrishna or all the great people who don't have egos, but they have a semblance of a ego which is not harmful. So we'll conclude. If there are some questions, you can just ask. Otherwise, we'll conclude for today. So we'll be meeting